Hey everyone, this is JT with Rooted Music, here with you today for an informational video covering the key of G major. In this video today, we're going to break down the key of G major, talk about all the notes, talk about the chords that are built from those notes, and kind of some general principles about chords, about keys that apply to every key. And today we'll kind of look at those principles through the lens of the key of G. So we're going to walk through this PDF form covering all this information here, and this PDF is available to you in the lower right hand corner of the page. So please click this. You can take this with you, and you can download it and look over it and practice this outside of just watching this video. So we highly recommend that you check that out. Awesome, so let's just go ahead and start and define what a key is. So a key is a group of notes that sound good together, and that's a pretty general definition, which it is the absolute truth. Every key that we're going to play in worship and pop music, every major key is going to sound great together, and each key has a specific set of rules to follow. And the reason they sound good is because these notes are in a perfect relationship with each other that make them sound good. These notes follow the rule. And so for us to better understand what the rules are of the key, why it sounds good, all of that, we must understand this first one here, the scale. So a scale is the map of the key in order that we know what notes we're allowed to play. So the scale defines the limits of our key. It tells us, hey, these notes are okay to play and these notes are not. And by knowing what notes we can play and what notes we can't play, that's just going to set us up for success as we're building chords, as we're learning how to put all of this together to make music. Awesome. So each scale is made up of 7 different notes. And here in the key of G, we have G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G. So I'm going to play it here on the piano for you so you can hear what it sounds like. So G, I'm starting on the G just below middle C. So G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Now if you were to play that scale with your right hand, you would just start on your thumb. So you have your first finger or your thumb, index finger or your second finger, your middle finger or your third finger. And then what we're going to do is cross my thumb under my middle finger. So back to thumb on C, second finger for D, third finger for E. My fourth finger plays F sharp up here. And then I play G with my fifth finger, and I can go back down the scale. So that type of fingering is typical for a lot of the scales, the major scales. So if you want to practice playing your scale, again, you just start with your thumb here on G and play up. And then when you get to C, you tuck your thumb under your middle finger. And then you end on your pinky up here and then back down. We bring my middle finger over my thumb to get to B. And we end there. Good. So if you just wanted to be able to play the scale, that's how you do it. All right. And one thing to note here in the scale is that if you look closely, you see in our 7 different notes, we have 8 total notes in the scale, but 2 of them are G. So we have 7 unique notes in the scale. You see that every letter is represented. So we have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Every letter is represented in the key, and we have no letters that repeat. So yes, we have 2 G's here that bookend our scale, but they're the same note. So you wouldn't see this F sharp called G flat and then G, because every scale has to have every letter represented in some form or another. So F sharp works because it's got F in it. There we go. We know F is represented by F sharp. And we know that we'll never have 2 of the same letter but different notes. So I would never have G flat or G natural in the same key. So that helps us know we call this F sharp instead of G flat. Good. Now every key regardless of what note it starts on. It could be the key of G, it could be the key of C, it could be the key of E flat. Whatever key we're working with holds to the same pattern of distance between our notes, and it's a combination of whole steps and half steps. So let's break this down. So a half step is just simply the distance from one note or one pitch on the piano to a neighboring note or pitch. So in the key of G, if I started on G, we could have a half step above would be A flat or G sharp, but in the key of G we already have a G, so here's A flat. So this is a half step. And the thing is, it's not just white keys to black keys. We can also go white keys to white keys. So B to C is a half step. But we can also go down instead of just going half steps up. So C to B is a half step down, as well as A flat to G is a half step down. Good. So a half step, again, is just going from one note to another note that is neighboring and touching that note on the piano. Good. And so now we have a whole step, which is represented by these W's here. And a whole step is simply two half steps put together. So if we're starting on G, we can count our two half steps up and go one half step, two half step. So G to A is a whole step. Good. And so we can count two half steps equal a whole step. And whole steps can be white key to white key. As we see here, we can have B flat, half step to C, so black key to white key. Or we can have black key to black key, so A flat, one half step, two half steps. Good. Remember that half steps and whole steps aren't limited to whether they're on the white keys or the black keys, but that it's really just about the distance between the two. So now let's go ahead and build our scale. We'll pretend that we don't know what these notes are in the scale, and let's see if we can build this with our pattern of steps. So we'll start on G. So just pretend in your mind you don't know what the notes are, and we got to figure it out on our own. So let's start on G. And I know that I have to go a whole step. So I go one half step, two half steps. So a whole step to A, followed by a whole step to B. So now we're here. We've got our first three notes down. Again, we start on G, and we can't measure a distance from something if we don't have a starting point, which is why there's 8 notes in the scale, but only 7 intervals here. So we start on G, and we've worked our whole step to A, whole step to B. Now we have a half step to C, because B and C are next to each other. Half step. A whole step to D, another whole step to E, one more whole step, and this is where the F sharp comes into play, because E to F sharp is a whole step, because if we went E to F, that's only a half step. So E to F sharp is our whole step, and then we finish with a half step on G. And there we go, and this applies to every key. So if we wanted to build, for instance, the key of D with this pattern of intervals, let's do it. So we have D, whole step, half, whole step, half. And that's what's so cool about the major scale and major keys. And a lot of the principles that we are learning today in this video can apply to any key. And it just changes based on what pitch you start your scale on. But all of these relationships between the notes stay the same, which is super cool. So now let's talk about chords. So just like that there are 7 different notes in each key, there are 7 different chords that we can build based off of these notes. So good. So before we really start building our chords, let's go ahead and actually identify our scale in Nashville numbers. And we here at Rooted encourage you to learn both the Nashville number system and letter notation. We just think it's going to be so good for you to be able to read both, because sometimes in a worship setting you'll find bands or specific leaders only refer to the chords by their Nashville number name or their number, and other worship leaders or bands will play and refer to the chords only by their letter name. So if you're well versed in both, that is going to make you a versatile musician, and it's going to give you a an advantage when it comes to being able to contribute in any situation. So let's assign our natural numbers here. So G is our 1 because it's the first note of the scale. And for natural numbers, all we're doing is starting on 1 and just assigning numbers up till we get back to 1 up here. So G is 1, A is 2, B is 3, C is 4, D is 5, E is 6, F sharp is 7, and G is back to 1. Good. So now that we know our letter names and our natural numbers, let's come back to the chords. So like we said, there are 7 different chords that we can build off of the notes in our scale. And these chords are called triads, meaning that we're playing 3 notes at the same time. Tri meaning 3. So the chords that we're going to build today just only have 3 notes, and there are some songs that you may have seen in videos where there's extra notes added on and things like that, and that happens in chord charts and suspensions and things like that. But today we're just going to be focusing on the basic forms of the chord, and as we go through those song videos, we'll explain the additional notes and things like that that you have to add to the chords, but the triads remain constant. So this is really good for us to learn the fundamentals of the triads today. Good. So here is just again stating that we're going to learn both the natural number system and the key scale. We already talked about this. So when we say a 1 chord, it's going to refer to the chord that we are going to build on the first note of our scale, which is G. So let's build our G chord or our 1 chord. So we start on G, which is the root of the chord or the namesake of our 1 chord. Then we add B and D. Now, how do we know? The question is, how do we know that B and D are the right notes that go along with G for this chord? Well, let's go ahead and figure that out. So chords and all really like Western music, Western meaning like any type of music that you would hear that's not like from other parts of the world that have very unique sounds, like modern pop music is Western music, worship music is Western music, most dance and EDM, like most of the music you're going to listen to would be considered Western music, and it is built on thirds. So all harmony in our music that we listen to throughout our society is built on the interval of a third. And so let's talk about what is the interval of a third. And a third just simply is the distance from one note to a next, and it encompasses 3 letters in the interval. So if I started on G and then moved to B, that's a third because G to B is a third. Good. So every triad that we're going to play has a third stacked on top of another third. So we have G to B is a third because we have 1, 2, 3 letters. It's an interval of a third. And then we go from B to D, which also this interval right here contains a third. Good. Now some of you may be wondering, well, how do I know not to play D flat or B flat, or how do I know? And the answer is because this key tells me what notes I have available. So because this says B instead of B flat, or this says D and not D flat, that's how I know that I'm not playing B flat or D flat. I only have G, B, and D available to me, and there we go. So now we have our root, which is the first note. We have our third, which is a third apart. And then our last note here is called the 5th of the chord, and this is because G to D are 5 letters apart. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is our 5th. G to D is a 5th. Good. And so every chord, every triad that we're going to build, regardless of how it sounds, whether it's major or minor or diminished, will always have a root, a third, and a 5th. Good. So now let's build the rest of these chords. So here we have our 2 chord. So starting our chord on A, which is the 2nd note of the scale. And then we go up a third. So we go A to C is a third. And then we come back up from C to E is our third. So we have A minor. Good. Let's keep going. So now we have our 3 chord or B minor. So we start on B. We build our third is D. And then we go to our 5th. which is F sharp. Good. Now here's our 4 chord or C. Start on C is the root, E is our 3rd, and G is our 5th. And again, we know what the root, 3rd, and 5th are. We've got our root, count 3 letters in our interval here, 1, 2, 3. E is the 3rd, 3 more letters, G is the 5th. Good, let's go to our 5 chord or D major. And so what we're going to do is we're going to play on D. Then we have F sharp. So here's the 3rd. And then F sharp, and we just circle this back to A, but because we have 2 G's here, we only count one of them. So 1, 2, 3. And there we go. D is our 5 chord. Now we have our 6 chords starting on E. G is our 3rd. B is our 5th. And then here we have our last chord, which is F sharp diminished. So we start on F sharp, go up a 3rd to A, F sharp, bring it back around to A, and then C is our 5th. And that one sounds a little weird, and we'll talk about that more in just a second. So we have built all of our chords. So let's go through it again real quick. G is our 1 chord, A minor is the 2, B minor is 3, C is 4, D is 5, E minor is 6, and F sharp diminished is 7. Good. And then we finish the scale with G or 1 again. Good. So now let's talk about the different types of chords and why they sound different and why they have different names. So in every key, we have 3 types of chords: major chords, minor chords, and diminished chords. And major and minor are the 2 that are more common. Diminished chords are rarely used in worship music, although some pop music and other genres of music will use diminished chords more likely, specifically jazz and some country and blues and things like that. But major and minor chords are primarily the ones we see in worship music. So let's talk about them. So a major chord definitely has a more stately, more majestic, or a happier sound. So like you can hear that and it sounds very bright, and it just has kind of a stately, majestic sound, whereas our minor chords kind of sound sad or mysterious. So again, you hear a little more tension in there, and we're going to talk through what the difference are between them. So let's start. So major chords are major if they have 4 half steps between the root and the 3rd. So let's build our G major chord and figure out if that's true. So we have G, which is our root, and we count half steps. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And there we go. Root to 3rd, 4 half steps, and we add our 5th. Major. Good. And so the major chords in the scale of the key of G are going to be G, which is our 1 chord, C, which is our 4 chord, and D, which is our 5 chord. And that holds true for every key we learn. Not necessarily G, C, and D, but the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord of every major key we're going to learn are major chords. So remember that 1, 4, 5 are always going to be major. Now let's talk about our minor chords. So chords are minor if they have 3 half steps between the root and the 3rd. So let's go ahead and build our A minor. We'll try that one and see how it sounds. So we start on A, and we have to go 3 half steps up to see if it's minor. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so A and C, we previously established that that is the correct root and 3rd. Then we add our 5th. And there we go. We have our minor chord. And if we built the other ones out, it's the same thing. So B, 1, 2, 3 to D, add the 5th. B minor is our 3 chord. And if we did E minor, 1, E is our root, and we count our half steps, 1, 2, 3. That's a minor 3rd, add our 5th. And there we go. And that's how we know that minor chords are minor, because they have 3 half steps between the root and the 3rd. And remember that we don't have to try to figure out which note do we play for the chords, because remember, the scale tells us which notes are available to us. Good. So now let's come on down here to diminished chords, and let's talk through diminished chords. So chords are diminished if they not only have 3 steps between the root and the third, but also only have 6 half steps between the root and the fifth. So that sounds like a lot, but let's break it down. So let's go ahead and build our F sharp diminished chord. So we start on F sharp and we count 3 half steps. 1, 2, 3. F sharp and A. And then all we do is count another 3 half steps. 1, 2, 3. And there is our F sharp diminished chord. And every 7 chord in any key is going to be diminished. And like I said, we don't see a lot of these in worship music, so you don't necessarily are going to need to know this for every song, but this is good information to know because there are a song once in a while, there will be a song where you have to play a diminished chord, and you know how it works. So now we know that we have 3 half steps between the root and the third. We also can remember that diminished chords are characterized by 6 half steps between root and fifth. So let's do that. So we start on our root and we count to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there it is. So F sharp to C is 6 half steps with our third in the middle, diminished. Cool. And now what I'm going to do is show you something a little bit different that's not in the key, but show you the difference between major chords, minor chords, and diminished chords. And this holds true for any key. So we're going to start on G. So here's G major, right? Because we have 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps between root and third. And we add our fifth. Now the difference between the major and the minor chord, say we want to know what's the difference between G major and G minor. The only thing I do is I take my third and I move it down a half step. And there's G minor because I went 1, 2, 3 half steps now. So that is G minor. The difference between major and minor is moving my third of the chord up and down by 1 half step. So minor has 3 half steps between root and third, and for major it has 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps between root and third. Now diminished chords are only 1 half step different than minor. So we have major, minor, and now for diminished, what we do is we lower our fifth down 1 half step, and there's our diminished. So the difference between major chords, minor chords, and diminished chords are only by moving our third either up or down a half step, and then when we have our minor chord, we move our fifth down 1 half step, and that's diminished. So here it is one more time just to see. This is just a little bit of extra knowledge that you can play around with if you want, but we have major, minor, and then we move this fifth down for diminished, and this holds true on every chord, regardless of what key or what pitch we start on. So I just did it on G. Let's do it on C. So here's C, C major. I lower my third a half step. C minor, lower my fifth a half step. And there's C diminished. Cool. So we now know the difference in the relationship between major chords, minor chords, and diminished chords. And just remember that in every major key, our major chords are our 1 chord, 4 chord, and our 5 chord. Our minor chords are our 2 chord, 3 chord, and 6 chord. And our diminished chord is only our 7th. And this seems like a lot of information, and it really is a lot of information. But again, we want you guys to be able to study this, practice this on your own, get familiar with all of the chords, how the scales are built, and we want you to understand that a lot of the principles and how the scale is built, how the notes relate to one another, apply to every key. Like these rules are concrete and solid throughout every key. The only difference is which note or which pitch you start on determines the notes that you play, but the relationships between them stay the same, which is really, really cool. And when, as a growing musician, or even as a seasoned or veteran musician, it's so good to learn this and have an understanding of this, because this is going to help you as you're adding, sevenths or suspensions or things into your chords. It's going to make sense. It's going to click because you already have the basic fundamental knowledge of the key and of triads down, and natural numbers, the letter names, everything that you're going to need to know to eventually move on to the more advanced stuff. I highly encourage that you take some time and study this. And again, it's really cool. The system's set up that we are going to provide videos for you in every key, so you can watch these and continue to learn about them, but know that every scale works the same way. It just differs on which note you start on and the names of the notes based on where you start. But again, guys, we hope this video was helpful to you. Again, I'd encourage you, pause the video, rewind it, play it back, whatever you need to do to study this, build those chords. You guys can totally do this, and we here at Rooted want to help you in any way that we can. There's a comment box down below. Please comment if you have questions or would love to just let us know how you're doing and how you're figuring all of this out. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We hope you have a great day.